Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. It's your old buddy Pinky. Another beautiful morning here in Florida. I'm up here in the office working on some videos, and I was just putting the finishing touches on a 5-part series that we just did on installing fender flares on a Miata. And it occurs to me that that's probably useful for people who are actually going to be putting fender flares on their Miata. But if you just want kind of an overview of it, if you're thinking about putting fender flares on a Miata, maybe you just need a kind of a speed run version of that. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of rip through all 5 of those episodes that we've already put out, and just kind of really quickly summarize what's involved in the project, just to give you kind of a better idea of what that involves. So the first thing you want to do is trace the outline of the flare onto the car. We're going to be painting our car, and so I don't really care about marking on the paint surface. But if you're trying to save your paint, this would be a good time to maybe cover these fenders with masking tape and work on the masking tape. But either way, go ahead and trace the outline, the outer edge of your fender flares onto the car. In the rear, we have inner fenders that we need to deal with. And so we need to find the height of the inner fender, because there's no point in cutting the outer skin higher than the top of the inner fender, right? So we've got the inner fender and it comes in and it meets the outer skin of the body. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the body back and then fold that inner fender up to meet the new body line, okay? So here we are, we're finding the height of the inner fender. I can save you guys a little bit of trouble here. If you just measure 2.5 inches up from the fender lip, that's the height that you need to cut at. So there you go. The front fenders, we need to indicate where the firewall comes down at the trailing edge of that wheel arch, because we don't want to cut the fender further back than the firewall, okay? So we're gonna basically find that mark and mark it on the outside of the front fender. Now we want to trace a line that follows the outer edge line that we initially drew, that establishes what we're going to definitely leave as a mounting flange for the flare, right? So basically, in my case, I think I used about 1.5 inches and just followed that first line to set a second line, which is a, don't cut past here kind of line. Now on the front fender, we are going to draw that firewall line, and we're going to take that up until it intersects with that new flange line that we just drew. And that's going to be our cut line, okay? So we're going to draw where the firewall is on that part. We're going to just go vertical, and then when we get up to our flange, inner flange line, we're going to follow that as the cut line on the front. There's no reason to leave extra metal. We don't want sheet metal hanging down in there. Okay, so because the front is so easy, let's go ahead and cut the front now with a happy song in our heart, thinking to ourselves, boy, this job is going to be super easy. So go ahead and cut the front to that, again, on the horizontal, the upper section, the arch section, we're going to be following the lower flange line. And then when it gets to the vertical section, we're going to follow the firewall line straight down. And that'll bring us all the way down to just ahead of where the lower pinch weld on the rocker panel is, okay? We don't want to, on the bottom of the car, where our jacks are, we have that pinch weld. We don't want to cut into that pinch weld. So we're not going to cut any further back than that pinch weld. You'll see in a second. Okay, so now it's time to get to work on the rear. The fronts were easy, the rears not so much. First thing we want to do is just peel the outer skin off along our cut lines, okay? So we're going to cut all the way around the arch, and then we're going to cut through the outer skin on our cut line. Now again, my cut line is a little bit higher than I need it to be. I'm about 3 inches. It really only needs to be about 2.5, but either way, it doesn't matter. It's not that big a deal. Okay, now that we have the skin off, you can really see what's kind of going on here. And there are sort of two main elements to reconstructing the wheel wells, okay? We have that upper arched section where we're going to basically bring the inner fender up to meet the new cut line, and we're going to tack weld along there. And then on the front edge of that rear wheel well, we have a vertical section where we actually have a pinch weld with a number of panels coming together. There's the outer body skin, you know, the rocker panel skin. There is an inner bulkhead. There's an outer rocker, inner rocker, and the bulkhead all come together. I think there may be another panel in there too, but they all come together in this one big thick pinch weld that runs vertically. And so on that, we're gonna cut back into that pinch weld flange, okay? We're gonna cut it off, and then we're just gonna weld all of those pieces together on their edges. Okay, so for the upper arch section, we're going to basically just hammer form the inner fender well so that it comes up and meets the new edge of the body skin, right? Don't rush this. It's going to take you a couple hours to do this properly. And the reason for that is you don't want to try to do it with don't get a sledgehammer and hit it 20 times, because it's going to look like you hit it with a sledgehammer 20 times. Not only are we bending that metal, but we're actually having to stretch it a bit. And so for that, we want to use kind of a medium-sized hammer, and we want to hit it a lot. And just watch it. You can really, steel is just a really very persistent liquid when you get right down to it. And you can really move it around quite a bit. You want to do that again. You want a million tiny blows, not 20 big ones, all right? But at the end of it, you're going to basically just stretch that inner fender up to meet your body line. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you can weld that inner fender up to the outer body skin. So we're dealing with real thin sheet metal here. So, it's going to be a lot of little spot welds. I like to start in the center of an arch and work outward, get the center to touch, put a spot weld on it, move out, a little bit of hammer forming, get that to touch, put a spot weld on it. And then once you get it all pinned down, come back in and start filling in randomly the spaces in between until you have a continuous weld, just so we don't get a lot of heat in any one place on a piece of sheet metal, which is either going to blow through or warp, okay? Okay, so once you've got the top arch all welded up, go ahead and cut off your excess inner fender well. And we're going to start working on the vertical component of the forward edge of the wheel well now. Now again, on the vertical portion, we're just going to cut away some of this the vertical pinch weld where all of these different body panels come together. Don't cut too far back into that pinch. Leave yourself enough that you can actually weld, we're going to have a bunch of panels that come together, and we're going to have to weld the edges of them, okay? Okay, so just like in the front, our cut line comes down till it meets up with the end of the pinch weld at the bottom of the rocker panel. Again, we don't want to ever cut into the rocker panel. So on this vertical seam, we want to make sure that we're holding those panels together as best we can. It's not really obvious here from the camera angle, but I've actually got a hammer that I'm pushing the handle up against that panel while I'm welding all of the edges of all of these panels together, okay? You can't have any space in here. So if you need to do some hammer forming, do that. If you need to have, push against it with something while you weld it, whatever, just get them all together. And then same deal as the upper arch, we're dealing with thin sheet metal here, so don't go ham. You just want a bunch of little dots, and we're going to keep coming back in and filling in all the little dots until we have that all welded up, okay? Again, it doesn't have to look like a row of dimes in here, guys. We just want it all sealed up. When it comes to grinding this stuff out, really just knock the tops off. Anything that's really standing proud, knock it off. But don't try to grind into them. Leave as much as you can because we just don't have much there, okay? Look, that's pretty clearly a good place for rust to start developing. So before we seal it up with seam sealer, I'm spraying it with a rust preventative called OSPHO. It's basically phosphoric acid. You spray it on there, give it 24 hours, and then put your seam sealer over the top of it, and that'll prevent any corrosion from ever developing in there. Now, while that's drying, we're going to drill all of our mounting holes and install the riv nuts or nutserts, whatever you want to call them. They're threaded inserts that are going to hold the flares on. All right, once the OSPHO has dried for 24 hours, you can go ahead and put your seam sealer on. Once the seam sealer sets up for 24 hours, you can go ahead and paint that seam, paint the parts of the quarter panel that are going to be inside the fender flare. Even though these are technically bolt-on flares, I'm going to bond them to the body anyway. Not the bumpers, because we have to take the bumpers off to do stuff in the future, but I am bonding them to the steel parts of the body using panel bonding adhesive. You know, then it's just a matter of attaching the flares. Once they're on, you're done. Put your wheels back on, roll it outside, and look at what you've done. So there you have it, right? Not a terribly complicated job, but also not a simple one. If you don't have the skills to do the hammer forming, to do the sheet metal welding, this is not the project to learn them on. right? Because you can just mess your car up really badly. And the internet is littered with videos of people who've hacked their cars up and are, using like spray foam to try to close up the gaping wounds that used to be their beautiful rear quarter panels. Don't do that. Don't be that guy. If you want to do fender flares and there's part of it that you're not comfortable with, reach out. We'll do it for you. We'll do some or all of it for you. But, don't just tear into your car without knowing what you're doing, because you really can ruin your car. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel. If it wasn't for people like you tuning in and watching, this would just be like a weird old man screaming into the void on the internet. So I appreciate you sparing me that fate. If you could subscribe, like, share, comment, any of that stuff, any sort of interaction with YouTube really helps us in terms of search placement on YouTube's algorithm. We're not monetized or anything, so it's really just to kind of get the content out there. So if you could help with that, I really do appreciate it, okay? You guys have a great day. Thanks so much.